All right. Good morning, and thank you for joining us, everyone. I'm Lila Hunt, the Deputy Director for Public Health and Campaigns with the Office of Cannabis Management, and today we're going to be launching our first public health education campaign. You're going to hear first from New York State Assembly Member Inez Dickens. She will be followed by the Office of Cannabis Management's Executive Director, Chris Alexander. You'll then hear from Julissa Gutierrez, our Chief Diversity Officer for the State of New York, who will provide remarks in Spanish. Julissa will be followed by the Commissioner of the Office of Addiction Services and Supports, Dr. Chinazo Cunningham, and we will conclude our speakers of the day with Alan Clear, the Director of the Office of Drug User Health at the New York State Department of Health. So let's get started. I'm going to turn the floor over to Assemblywoman Dickens. She represents Central and West Harlem, which includes City College, where we are today. Assemblymember Dickens is a lifelong resident of the district, and throughout her career has taken an active role in economic development, supporting small businesses with a focus on minority and women-owned business enterprises, and strengthening the Harlem community. As the community's representative, she fights hard for social justice, wage equity, inclusion, and diversity. Thank you for joining us today, Assemblymember.
Thank you so much, and welcome, welcome. Good morning, and welcome to City College, and welcome to Harlem. This is a special, special day that we're doing this, and we're very happy to have you here. It was just about 1 year ago that we joined together in the legislation in order to enact the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation, don't forget the Taxation Act, and our state's cannabis law. It ushered in a momentous change for our state. We saw firsthand here in Harlem, West Harlem, East Harlem, and in all Black and brown communities all over the state of New York, how for decades the over-criminalization of cannabis prohibition broke up families and created barricades to opportunity for forced incarceration for small amounts of marijuana. With the passage of the MRTA, we ended prohibition and the disproportionate policing that came with it. And we already see a change as arrests have plummeted downward for small amounts. The new cannabis industry brings with it a promise to help offset those that that are harmed and harnessed within this industry, and it is an industry, by breaking down barricades and creating pathways to opportunity for those who come from communities that have been most impacted by overcriminalization and by the excessive use of marijuana. Our state's cannabis law sets a high 50% goal for the participation of social and economic entrepreneurs. 50%. It then reinvests that revenue generated from the industry into revitalization out of most of the communities that have already been harmed. For it to achieve this goal, though, we must first and foremost ensure safety. Safety is prime. That includes educating the public on the cannabis law and on cannabis itself. Today, the state is taking the next step in educating the public on the facts around cannabis. And trust me, it's a big one. With this campaign, every New Yorker will hear and see and be able to understand the facts and have the chance to learn more. All they have to do is visit cannabis.ny.gov. Cannabis.ny.gov. But I don't want to get too far ahead. Next, you will hear from the Office of Cannabis Management Executive Director, Chris Alexander. Give it up for him, please. Chris is a criminal justice reformer, an advocate who has spent his career successfully fighting to overturn the laws that made marijuana illegal and support those communities most harmed by disproportionate enforcement of its prohibition. I want to thank all of you again for joining us today, and I want you to give a rounding applause and a welcome to Chris. And the floor is yours. By the way, I want to say I have to run out because we haven't passed the budget. And if we don't pass the budget, there's no checks. And so, because of the public being affected, even though we've got an extender, I've got to get back up to Albany. So I wanted to be here for this because it's so important, because it's in my community, it's in City College, my college, you know. But I've got to get back up to Albany, and I want to thank all of you. Chris, thank you. The floor is yours.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Assemblywoman, for your leadership, for your time today, and for your continued work to advance the principles of the MRTA of inclusion and opportunity. Thank you all for joining us today. This is such a special day for me, for our team, for our state. I want to thank Dr. Cunningham. I want to thank Alan, Julissa, board member Jen Metzger, who's from our Cannabis Control Board, who is here, and our team for the work that they've done pulling this together. You know, so much of the work to end cannabis prohibition in the state, you know, focused on fighting back misnomers and misinformation and stigma that's now heavily laid in our communities, and you know, really have created quite a bit of confusion about the cannabis plant, but also about the work that followed the end of prohibition. Today, the Office of Cannabis Management is taking an important first step to start a new conversation with the public. A conversation that's rooted in facts, that's rooted in evidence, and that centers community and public health. As the Assembly member mentioned, we're almost a year to the date when New York's cannabis law was enacted, which put an end to cannabis prohibition in the state, and really represented a shift of cannabis policy in the state from one that focused on criminalization to one that centered public health, diversity, and inclusion. Thankful to the leadership by Governor Kathy Hochul, we today have the resources to start a new cannabis conversation with the people of New York. That conversation will focus on making sure that every New Yorker has the basic information that they need to know how cannabis laws are going to be enforced moving forward in this state. That conversation will also include important pieces of information related to public health and how New Yorkers can protect themselves, their family members, while also advancing the public policy goals of the cannabis law. This phase of the campaign will focus on the fact that New York has legalized cannabis, but only for adults who are 21 years and over. It will remind adults who are eligible to utilize and to possess cannabis that they should use cannabis away from other people, particularly smoking cannabis away from other people. reminding them that they need to lock up cannabis and store it out of reach of children and pets, and to remind them, of course, not to drive under the influence. This is just the start of this conversation. As it moves forward, we will bring in new messages around the expansion of the medical cannabis program, the risk of consuming while pregnant or breastfeeding, as well as informing New Yorkers of the opportunities that exist in the new industry that we are building. Every advertisement that New Yorkers experience, whether through television or social media, or in print or on radio, will direct them back to the cannabis.ny.gov website, which is the Office of Cannabis Management's website, where they can find resources and fact sheets that provide them with more information to continue that conversation. I cannot go much further without first, of course, reminding you all that although we are launching this campaign at this point in time, that we have not yet begun legal sales for adults outside of the medical program. And so we are starting a conversation and starting education in advance of that program becoming active and those licenses being issued. That being said, the cannabis that folks are using today is not tested and not taxed, and part of the goals of the cannabis law is to ensure that we improve public health outcomes by removing products that have not been tested from the marketplace and from the streets. So we are encouraging New Yorkers, if you are participating in cannabis use, to hold off for tested and regulated products unless you are participating in the medical program. I want to say a little bit of a note about the development of the campaign as well. The information that's going to be provided today and to New Yorkers moving forward was developed through a series of rigorous research, engagement with other states and partners across this state, learning from other states what has worked and what has not worked in their education campaigns to improve outcomes and to increase education. We want this to be informative, but we also want it to be effective. Right now, in the research that we did building up to the campaign, we found that very few New Yorkers knew that we had legalized it all. And that was a big problem. And so we're starting with this cannabis conversation and hopeful to continue this dialogue as we move forward and continue to build out this program. We also informed this conversation through what was a rigorous dialogue with the public over these last couple months via a virtual cannabis conversation series that was hosted by our Cannabis Control Board Chair, Tremaine Wright, who couldn't be here today. But that gave us quite a bit of information and feedback in terms of what information New Yorkers really needed to know. So, it's been a lot of hard work put into this. I cannot be more proud of my team, our Deputy Director of Public Health and Campaigns, Lila Hunt, our Director for Communications, Freeman Klopote, who built this campaign with our outside partners. We really appreciate that work. And I want to give as well a big shout out again to our Cannabis Control Board, represented today by former Senator Jen Metzger. Y'all's leadership is incredible and really appreciated at this time. It's a big moment for New York. I'm very excited. I'm thankful to you all who have joined us here today. You'll hear next from Julissa Gutierrez, our state's Chief Diversity Officer, who has spent her career giving voice to and increasing opportunities for diverse populations across our state. Julissa, thanks. Thank you.
Good morning, buenos días. Gracias, Chris. Muchísimas gracias. Se siente maravilloso estar con ustedes esta mañana en el lanzamiento de Conversaciones Cannabis, la primera campaña de educación pública de cannabis por el estado de Nueva York. La campaña es una reflexión de cuánto ha cambiado y lo lejos que hemos llegado en Nueva York, a medida que hemos pasado de la criminalización a la legalización y educación. Está claro, ya de las conversaciones que hemos tenido, que ha mencionado Chris, que los neoyorquinos tienen muchas cosas que aprender y tienen también muchas preguntas. Queremos asegurarnos de que tienen la información correcta de nuestra ley del cannabis y cómo, cuándo y dónde pueden consumir a manera segura. Queremos estar seguros de que estamos haciendo todo posible para proteger nuestra juventud y mantener nuestras carreteras seguras. La ley del cannabis de Nueva York, aprobada hace apenas solo año pasado, puso fin a abordar el cannabis desde una política de aplicación de ley y la reemplazó con un enfoque en salud pública, justicia social y de desarrollo económico equitativo. La ley también refleja el entendimiento que la educación en salud pública es clave para hacer que este cambio histórico y proporciona los recursos necesarios para que llegue la información a cada neoyorquino. Con estos recursos en mano y gracias al apoyo de la gobernadora Hochul, podemos lanzar la campaña Conversaciones Cannabis para que todos los neoyorquinos puedan unirse a la discusión y aprender la información correcta. Esta campaña de $5 millones se distribuirá en 3 meses y en 3 fases. La primera fase, a partir de hoy, se centra en un mensaje universal en 30 segundos que resalta lo siguiente. El Estado de Nueva York de Cannabis ha legalizado el cannabis solo para adultos mayores de 21 años. Mantener el humo de cannabis de segunda mano alejado de otras personas. Encerrar el cannabis y almacenarlo fuera del alcance de los niños y las mascotas. Y no conducir bajo la influencia del cannabis. La fase 2 y 3 de la campaña reforzan esos mensajes y ampliarán la campaña a incluir mensajes de nuestras metas de equidad para la industria, el programa de cannabis medicinal y los riesgos de consumir durante el embarazo o la lactancia. Sin embargo, será negligente si no dejará una cosa absolutamente clara. Las ventas legales para adultos están cerca, pero aún no están aquí. Eso significa que, fuera del programa médico, no hay ventas legales del cannabis en Nueva York. Los productos que se venden no han sido probados y son francamente inseguros. Estamos trabajando con otras agencias para hacer cumplir la ley. Y les recordamos a los neoyorquinos que las ventas seguras y legales van a llegar al fin de este año. Llegar a lo de hoy requirió un amplio esfuerzo de equipo. Incluyó varias discusiones con otros estados que legalizaron el cannabis por adultos antes de Nueva York para comprender qué funcionó y qué no en sus esfuerzos de educación pública. Como mencionó Chris, escuchamos directamente de neoyorquinos en nuestras conversaciones cannabis que ayudaron a dar forma a esta campaña. Y esto es el resultado de mucho trabajo. Y quiero agradecer al equipo de OCM que ha dedicado los últimos meses a desarrollar esta campaña, incluso cuando estaban jugando papeles claves, a crear una nueva oficina completamente y en el apoyo a nuestra rápida sucesión de logros. Y mientras que estaban desarrollando esta campaña, la Oficina de Gestión de Cannabis también expandió ampliamente el programa médico, lanzó formalmente el programa de CBD y estableció un camino para que las primeras ventas de uso adultos sean efectivas a finales de este año, 2022, con la iniciativa de oportunidades de la sembración de la gobernadora. Así que un fuerte aplauso y un gran reconocimiento a Laila Hunt, la subdirectora de Políticas y Campañas de Salud Pública, y también a Freeman Clope, director de Comunicaciones. Y también quiero agradecer el Centro de Servicios de Medios de la Oficina de Servicios Generales, que ayudó a dar vida a esta campaña, a las ideas, y también a OPAD, una empresa propiedad de mujeres y minoridades, MWPE, por sus siglas en inglés, que se asoció con el OSM para conseguir que esos anuncios salieran al público hoy en día al frente de todos los neoyorquinos. Este es un gran momento en Nueva York y estoy nuevamente agradecida que usted nos está acompañando hoy en día y que estamos aquí en ese lanzamiento. Muchísimas gracias a todos y ahora le devuelvo la palabra a Laila, que le va a mostrar los anuncios de publicidad. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you, Jalissa. So now it's time to see some ads. First up, we're going to show you our 30-second public service advertisement that's introducing our campaign and delivering on some key messages.
New York State has legalized cannabis, and to help understand what that means, we are starting the cannabis conversation. Who can use, where to use, and how to safely use. You must be at least 21 to legally use, possess, or buy cannabis in New York. If you choose to smoke cannabis, do it away from other people. Cannabis should always be stored out of reach of children, and you should never drive under the influence. Join the cannabis conversation at cannabis.ny.gov.
All right. And now we'll watch the same video, 30-second overview for for television in Spanish.
El estado de Nueva York ha legalizado el cannabis y para ayudar a entender lo que esto significa, hemos comenzado la conversación Cannabis. ¿Quién lo puede usar, en dónde y cómo hacerlo de manera segura? Por ley se debe de tener 21 años para su uso, posesión o su compra dentro de las líneas estatales. Si eliges fumar cannabis, hazlo a una distancia de otras personas. El cannabis se debe guardar fuera del alcance de niños y nunca se debe manejar bajo la influencia. Únete a la conversación Cannabis en cannabis.ny.gov.
And next we'll hear the 30-second overview for radio in English.
New York State has legalized cannabis, and to help understand what that means, we are starting the cannabis conversation. Who can use, where to use, and how to safely use. You must be at least 21 to legally use, possess, or buy cannabis in New York. If you choose to smoke cannabis, do it away from other people. Cannabis should always be stored out of reach of children, and you should never drive under the influence. Join the cannabis conversation at cannabis.ny.gov. Brought to you by the New York State Office of Cannabis Management.
Great. And now we'll listen to it in Spanish.
El estado de Nueva York ha legalizado el cannabis y para ayudar a entender lo que esto significa, hemos comenzado la conversación Cannabis. ¿Quién lo puede usar, en dónde y cómo hacerlo de manera segura? Por ley se debe de tener 21 años para su uso. Si eliges fumar cannabis, hazlo a una distancia de otras personas. El cannabis se debe guardar fuera del alcance de niños y nunca se debe manejar bajo la influencia. Únete a la conversación Cannabis en cannabis.ny.gov. Un mensaje del New York State Office of Cannabis Management.
So in addition to the 30-second videos we just watched and listened to, we'll also have 15 and 6-second versions that you'll see as well on television, streaming services, and social media. And also in this first wave, we'll see some static images like these posted on transit, on billboards, and other out-of-home assets as well. As Chris and others mentioned, this initial overview starts the 3-month campaign. Future waves of the campaign will dive deeper into each of these messages that we listened to today, with the next wave starting in a couple weeks. So you're going to be seeing the public service advertisements all over New York State for the next 3 months or so. Before we let you all go, we're going to hear next from Oasis Commissioner Dr. Chinazo Cunningham. Dr. Cunningham has spent more than 2 decades researching and developing pioneering programs that focus on people who use drugs. Dr. Cunningham, thank you for joining us.
Good morning. I'm happy to be here. I think this is really a groundbreaking moment here with our Cannabis Conversations campaign in New York, and it's reflective of the shift in the policy and really the focus here on public health and reducing the harms that have really been present for a long time with the illicit, underground market of cannabis. So this campaign of this size and this scale with a statewide footprint that plays over 3 months is really going to be the beginning of many conversations for us to have, and is really rooted in science, which is absolutely critical. So as many of us know, cannabis is already in our communities. I know this as a practicing physician for 25 years in the Bronx and in New York City, and also as a mother of 3 daughters. And while we know that cannabis has been in our communities for a long time, we really have been looking for tools to help us have these conversations. So tools as parents to have with young people and tools as medical providers to have with our patients. We need these tools to be clear and to be based on science so that everybody can understand really the truth about cannabis. And so Cannabis Conversations is the campaign that's going to deliver these tools not only to parents and to providers, but to all of New Yorkers. This campaign is more important now than ever, as we know that the illicit cannabis market has been growing. We've seen candy and food infused with cannabis. We see marketing that often targets young people. And we don't know what the content of cannabis is right now. We don't know what the THC content is, and we certainly don't know if there are other chemicals in the cannabis products. And so legalization is going to help us really know the facts and better regulate and monitor cannabis. So as you've heard, there are no legal adult use cannabis products right now, and the most safe products that exist are medical products. And if interested, talk to your medical provider to get those. But the Cannabis Conversations are going to be important because it's going to remind us to keep our cannabis safe, to lock it up and keep it away from children. It's going to help us navigate the legal market and reduce the risk of the illegal market. And it's also going to raise importance raise awareness about addiction and problematic use of cannabis. So not only helping us to recognize what those signs are, but then also how to seek help. And so for us, as the Commissioner of the New York State Office of Addiction Services and Supports, also known as OASAS, we're happy to be part of the responsible steps around legalization and to be partnering with the Office of Cannabis Management, the Cannabis Control Board, and others. We're closely going to be monitoring calls to our Hope Line and making sure that we have services available for those who do develop problems with cannabis. We're currently preparing our providers across the state so that they understand legal cannabis use and also understand how to treat cannabis use disorder. So again, we're happy to be part of the solution and to partner with our other agencies across the state to make sure that we're taking responsible steps for cannabis legalization. So next, I'd like to introduce you to one of our partnering agencies and partners in this, Alan Clear, who's the director of the Office of Drug User Health of the New York State Department of Health's AIDS Institute. In that role, Mr. Clear plans, designs, and implements programs to improve access to care, including those that prevent HIV and hepatitis C among people who use drugs. He's worked in the field of drug user health and harm reduction for over 30 years. Alan.
Thank you, Dr. Cunningham. It's actually really nice to be here with Commissioner Cunningham and Commissioner Alexander and have the three DOH, Office of Cannabis Management, and OASAS all working together in alignment to promote this change that's really critical to all New Yorkers who have an interest in consuming cannabis and everyone else who is there to look out for their loved ones. This is Public Health Week, and so it's very germane that we're apropos that we're doing the Cannabis Conversation kickoff this week. Whether you favored legalization or not, I think we can all agree it's important to ensure that New Yorkers have fact-based information to make the choices that are best for their health. The Cannabis Conversation public service advertisements you will see on television, transit, and billboards, in which we saw here today, and here on the radio and streaming apps, will give you a taste of that information. It will be up to you to take the next step and visit cannabis.ny.gov and get the answers to some of your most pressing questions. I encourage all New Yorkers to take that deeper dive and really get the facts so you can have informed discussions with your friends, neighbors, and the youth in your life. While further research is certainly necessary, we know that cannabis has medical benefits, but it also comes with risks. New Yorkers should be aware of what those are. For example, with Cannabis Conversations, you'll see and hear advertisements encouraging you to keep your cannabis smoke away from others. Travel through to cannabis.ny.gov and you'll learn that initial research shows that there are potential risks with secondhand cannabis smoke. Just like tobacco, we don't want your decision to smoke cannabis to be forced upon others by putting your secondhand smoke in their faces, so please be mindful and keep it away. You'll also see and hear advertisements on storing cannabis securely and away from children and others focused on the conversations parents and other caregivers can have with youth in their lives. On cannabis.ny.gov, you'll have access to further information on the risks of youth use and fact sheets providing you with the tools to have those conversations. It is exciting to see this important information being made available and distributed widely to New Yorkers. This is a critical part of the shift we're undertaking as we leave criminalization behind us and really focusing on improving public health outcomes. I'm proud to see New York advancing this campaign and provide New Yorkers with the tools to make the choices that are best for them. Thank you to the Governor, to the Office of Cannabis Management and Cannabis Control Board, and along with our other partners, for taking this seriously and delivering a campaign that New Yorkers can trust. And now back to my friend Lila to close out our event.
Thank you, Alan. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We're going to allow our guests to leave, but reporters, if you want to stick around, Chris Alexander, our executive director, is going to be taking some questions. So thanks all, and have a great day.
All right, here we go. Can I raise this?
It'll pick up.
Okay, all right.
Can you just talk about next?
Opportunity Initiative, the governor announced that last month, and so we are in process. We've received applications from the hemp farmers, previously hemp farmers who are going to be transitioning over to the adult use market. We're in the process of reviewing those applications. So we are excited that New York farmers are actually about to lead the way for the development of New York's market. And so that's really the next step for us, as well as continuing this important work here today of getting a real dialogue started with the people of New York who are interested in learning more about cannabis, how they should use, where they can store the product, and of course, eventually where they can purchase it.
And just can you give us some sense of the horizon, though? And I swear we're going to talk about marketing campaigns.
No problem.
The horizon looks like, how soon?
We are, yeah. No, we were very excited that when we announced the Seeding Opportunity Initiative, it was with the also understanding that we are going to be able to have adult use sales before the end of 2022, which is record time for any state who's undertaking this mission. And so, yes, we'll have sales before the end of this calendar year. In some sales. In some form.
Talk a little bit about the ads that are going out there. This is kind of unprecedented for New York. We've never seen anything like this. How do you come up with this style of ad versus, when you advertise anything, you can do a ton of ways to do it. Why did you choose this particular approach, this particular style?
In my comments, I talked about, us being not only informative and having a real fact-based discussion, but being effective. And so we wanted to present the information in a way that people will be able to receive it. We're past the dare years, we're past the just say no time, and learned that in order to be effective and to really reach the audience that we're trying to reach, you got to deliver the material in a way that they can receive it. And so we felt this was the best approach for now. And again, I want to remind folks, this is just the start. Just like with the conversations around licensing, we're just starting this process. We've got 100 years of stigma to undo, to re-educate the state of New York on what cannabis is, how it can be used, how it can benefit their lives, but also, the risks where they exist. And so we're really focused on being effective. And so that's kind of really what guided us in this way.
You did say something about warning for people for consuming cannabis now. Can you elaborate on that? It does sound like you're saying regulation is a good thing because
Absolutely.
it's regulated,
Absolutely.
but it's not there yet.
Absolutely, and that's one of the goals, as Dr. Cunningham stated, of legalization, right? We're creating a framework to ensure that the products that are ending up with the user have gone through some rigorous testing. We make sure there's no harmful chemicals in that product, and so that's one of the steps and some of the work that our office is going to do moving forward as we get the market and supply chain established. Really, one of the most important goals and outcomes of legalization is getting regulated product out there. Not knowing, especially with the overdose crisis that we've been dealing with in this state, where products are laced with other products that you don't know, and our regulated framework is the best protection against that. What I really was speaking about, though, is that we have since before Prohibition, cannabis is everywhere. Cannabis is the most widely used illicit substance, previously illicit substance, thankfully in New York. But that meant that folks have all sorts of product sources. We have gifting operations going on across the state, which our office has been very clear are not legal. And so we're taking our own action to ensure that those businesses are shut down, but also that the operators understand that if they're interested in pursuing a license to operate in the space, that they have to cease those operations. But really, it's to guard against that. We're launching these messages. We're trying to educate the public, but we want them to know very clearly that regulated adult use sales have not yet begun unless they're interested in the medical market, which we really encourage folks to visit.
Just actually follow up on the dispensaries.
Sure thing.
That have kind of essentially jumped the gun, breaking law.
Absolutely.
Yep. I know cease and desist letters have been sent out. In terms of enforcement, are you doing anything more, or is it just letters?
No, there's more enforcement action coming. We have tried to, again, similarly to what we're trying to do with the public, with these operators, to take an education-first approach, to let them know that the loophole that they're identifying in the law does not exist, and that instead, they've got to, especially if they're interested in the real opportunity that we're creating here, they've got to cease those operations. So yes, we have other enforcement mechanisms that we're now reviewing and seeing which is going to be most efficient, again, to make sure that we curb this behavior. We're talking about shutting them down.
And any advice for users of cannabis while we're waiting for legalization?
Yeah, that's the point I made earlier. So many of cannabis users in this state and nationally, as survey data has shown, are self-medicating. Whether it be for a pain that they're experiencing, anxiety, PTSD, those are all conditions that can be treated under our medical program. So we're encouraging folks to connect with their doctor, get certified, and become participants in our medical program, where they have a different type of approach to their cannabis use, where they can have real doctor's input in that process. And so that's my big recommendation, to visit and frequent our medical program, which has sales right now. You can go to the dispensary right now and not have an issue.
Good, everybody?
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming, guys. Thank you.
Cannabis Conversation.